everybody. Welcome to the training, learning, and development community. Thanks for coming in today. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad to have you here. Normally what I do is I kind of start out saying hello to all of the live audience participants by reading out their names, but that's going to be impossible right now because we have over 50 of you already in. So this is awesome. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for sharing your Friday with us. You're probably as excited about this conversation with Devlin as I am, because we're going to be talking today about how to become an instructional designer in 2020. And this article, it was definitely a great read, and I've linked to it in the bottom of the screen. You can see a big green button. If you want to go ahead and open that up in another window, it'll probably help, so you can kind of follow along as we go through this conversation. But yeah, and I'd like to say, like Devlin, like Kara's saying, you're a big deal. And so I'd like to sort of start out with that. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and let me know, because I had no clue that you're going to bring in as many registrants to this event as you have. So
yeah. Like I said, I didn't really expect that either, but thank you everyone for showing up. This is exciting. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, so I'm like a freelance independent consultant, instructional designer. I've been at it for a few years now, and yeah, I'm gonna get distracted by this chat for sure throughout this. But but yeah, happy, looking forward to answer questions related to breaking into the field or freelancing related questions. Yeah.
Excellent. So, and you were saying like, do you have an English lit undergrad?
Yeah, I studied English lit and international affairs when I was an undergrad, but that second major was really just like French and philosophy classes. Mm-hmm. So really a humanities background. I was thinking I was going to break into teaching or pursuing a PhD. Wasn't super thrilled with the job prospects and I guess salaries associated with those careers. So when I was a senior in college, I applied for a journalism job and interviewed with them. And at the end, they were like, well, we don't have room on our journalism team, but we have room on our corporate training team. And it was just like 12 hours a week. It was remote. So it wasn't a really big deal of a job, but it helped me get exposed to the field. And that's when I started doing a lot more research about instructional design and e-learning and downloading like authoring tool trials and playing around with those. And I was like, well, this is something I could kind of see myself doing. And I knew that Florida State, the university I was attending, had a really good master's program for instructional design. Mm-hmm. So I started looking into their like promotional materials and talking to the program director and applied. And a week later, I was in the program. And that first semester, I was landing my first gigs on Upwork and putting together a portfolio. And that's and soon after I dropped the other part-time gig and was just doing the freelancing stuff.
Wow, yeah. That's really impressive. So you actually went out onto Upwork and started advertising yourself as a freelance person, and you were getting work as an instructional designer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I really tried to leverage that. I guess it was 6 to 8 months of experience that I had already, doing instructional design for a tech company out in California, and just tried to really like show that I was passionate about the field. And there was a company in Canada that was looking to just have some really minor training work done. And he's like, yeah, I know you don't have much work to show, but I could tell you're like really passionate. So this isn't a real big risk for us. It was like a $400 project, like something really small. That was the first and only project I did on Upwork, but it really helped me because I could use that for my portfolio, which helped me land my next client. And then it was just kind of like, a domino effect.
Right. And then I think that's a really important point to sort of to stress right now, is that if you are a beginning instructional designer, somebody that's just getting into the field, you just got to rack up that experience. And I don't know if Upwork overall was a positive, experience for you, but that is just one way of being able to just get started, just, offering those services out there and getting the work done, being able to fill that portfolio out to start with. All right. Awesome. That's great to hear. Now, let's just start getting into this article. We have a ton of questions. A lot of them were sort of seeded by myself as I went through the article, but we have a lot from the audience too. And try not to get distracted by the chat, because I definitely am as well. It's flying by. But let's start with this. Now, why did you write the article that we're talking about? I mean, did you see like you felt like there was a need out there for it, or what exactly was your motivation for getting this article?
Good question. I definitely felt like there was a need for it. So when I was getting into the field, I spent a lot of time on the instructional design subreddit, both reading all of the questions that everyone else would ask and asking questions myself, like which technology should I learn in the Adobe suite, and authoring tool questions and freelancing questions, things like that. And then these more experienced people in the community would always chime in and help. So it was a really good place for me breaking into the field. And then as I gained more experience, I just started answering as many questions as I could that I felt like I could, bring some value to. So there's a lot of new instructional designers on that subreddit. So it was kind of like seeing a constant stream of all these questions and struggles that people were dealing with breaking into the field. And I had been there a couple of years before, so I was I knew that struggle and process intimately, I guess you could say, and I knew what helped and what didn't. So, and in addition to that, I had a couple of friends who, as I was getting into this field, I told them more about it, and since then they've broken into the field and they're going through the master's program I went through, and I helped them build their portfolios and do their first interviews, and then just some other people from the Reddit too. I would reach out to them and it would be kind of like a mentor relationship, and they've gotten jobs since then. So I kept helping these people in these one-off situations, but I really wanted to put something out there that would, help people en masse without being on a call like this, one-on-one. So awesome. I kind of, just compiled all of that and spent a month at a coffee shop churning it out. So,
hey, Brandon or Shannon, you guys are talking about the subreddit a little bit. If you guys can link to that subreddit right now, it'd be great. Oh, thank you. Of course, Kara just drops it in there. Now, so you wrote this article in August of 2019. I didn't realize that at first when I first read it. But then I saw that you updated it just, on June 12th, a couple weeks ago. What were the parts that you updated?
Yeah, so I've updated the article several times since publishing it. When I first published it, I shared it a lot and asked everyone for feedback, and I got a lot of good feedback and applied that. On the June 12th update wasn't anything big. I had actually just published a really big article about XAPI and learning record stores, which kind of the same idea with that as I had with this. And all I did on June 12th was a link to that article when I first mentioned XAPI in the instructional design article. But I also updated it today because I hadn't updated it in a couple months, like content-wise. So I think I just added a mention of Webflow, which is a tool I use to build the latest version of my website. I didn't have that in there originally because I didn't know about it at the time. Mm-hmm. And I think I added a part on like the learning. When I talk about learning objectives, I mentioned like these learning objectives are to help guide your design, not necessarily something you want to put on a slide in front of learners, like your technical learning objectives. I got that feedback from Jolt Ola. I hope I'm
Jolt. Yeah.
Yeah, he gave me that feedback a couple of weeks ago, I think. So I wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, I want to pause there and just talk about Webflow just real quick, because I'm a Webflow user as well. If anybody goes to the TLDC.com, that's a Webflow site. It's a no-code site. So you can actually build like, a fully featured website, like Devlin's without any code. Most of it is just like, it's like really database oriented. It's absolutely fantastic. There is a cost associated with it though, but it includes a builder and different features, but just something to keep in mind, especially if you're building out a portfolio. And maybe we can even talk a little bit about other opportunities for tools, portfolio tools as well later. Now, somebody that has written an article of this length and this size covering so much information, is there anything that you think you might be updating even more as we go forward into the future? You added Webflow recently, but anything else? I mean, can you see anything, especially with, the way that the workplace is changing at this point? Do you have any ideas, just to throw that out there?
I think as the workplace changes, I would definitely need to update this, and hopefully it will change, and there will be more focus on like performance improvement. But and I tried to mention that in the article, but I think that what's in there now is really like the foundational like skills and knowledge that you kind of need. But yeah, as new tools come up, new theories come up that are becoming widely adopted, I definitely would want to include them. Feedback is really important, so that was kind of my brain dump back in August. And then since then, it's been like this evolving document as more people chime in and say, oh, you left out this, or you could probably elaborate more here. And I know I have a ton of content up in here about freelancing and pricing and contracting and everything related to the running your own business side of things. But I didn't want to dive into that too much in this article, because I know a lot of people who are looking for full-time jobs would be there and might not necessarily care so much about that other content.
How much did writing this article benefit you? Like, how much did you learn as you authored this piece?
Again, so this one surprisingly didn't take like a ton of research. Like, the theory part, I'm just like pulling up from my master's, and I did have to research some things to make sure I'm like not just relying on my memory, obviously. But I guess I could say like the outline came from memory. So I feel like that content was all just like already existing up here. But yeah, it benefits me because I get a ton of messages from people like on LinkedIn and email and stuff, like letting me know how it's helped them. So I guess that's been nice. It's like a little daily reminder, like I'm doing something that's helping people.
Right.
So that's been nice. I think, well, actually just now, like just yesterday, if you Google like instructional design or instructional designer, at least in the United States, that article is like coming up on the front page of Google. So it's driving some traffic to my website. I think one client found me through it. So yeah.
There you go. So I the reason I asked that question is because I almost sort of recommend that other people try to do the same thing, right? Because by doing that research, you're going to end up learning more about what you're doing. So I just throwing that out there. Now, this is like the most popular question that was upvoted in here in Crowdcast, but you make the distinction between corporate instructional designers versus higher ed instructional designers, also in-house instructional designers versus e-learning vendor instructional designers, also self-employed instructional designers versus full-time employee instructional designers. Why is this important for instructional designers, especially like in 2020?
So if anyone's been in the field for even a little bit, you probably know the skill set you're expected to bring to the table or the skill set you use on a daily basis varies wildly depending on your role in this field. So I haven't worked in higher education, but I know that what a role will look like there is much more working with faculty, helping them bring their courses online and a tool like Canvas or Blackboard, maybe not even using tools like Articulate Storyline, which is a tool that someone like me at times has worked in every day. So yeah, corporate versus higher ed, very different. And even within the corporate space, if you're working for a vendor, you might just be the instructional designer where you're writing storyboards and learning objectives and working with subject matter experts, and then handing that off to an e-learning developer who builds it in Storyline. Whereas if you're just the sole ID at a company, you'll be the person who's doing everything. You'll be working with the subject matter experts, writing the content, building the courses, filming the videos, maybe even recording your own narration. Yeah. So it really does vary. And I wanted to make that distinction early on so that, if you're like, oh, I really want to be a higher ed ID, this article is going to go into things that might not be as relevant. But I think the learning theory is relevant throughout. Like that's the common thread throughout all of this, I would say.
Right. I just want to say, I've seen similar types of articles, but that's the first time I've seen someone actually tackle that piece. And I think it makes it really, really unique. And I think it's very, very important. And I'm going to just follow up with this question that Shonda had asked. How do you move into instructional design when working a full-time job in a different field? And no, this wasn't one of the seeds that I earlier, but can you that's a great question. I just wanted to throw that in there.
That's a tough one. So So yeah, I guess, so when I did land that first full-time job, I was a full-time student. I was doing an undergraduate thesis, which like I wanted to like stop doing at one point and focus on instructional design. But my advisor was like, Devlin, like you can't stop this. Like you have to finish this. But I dropped my schedule. I was like enrolled in the ID stuff, but I had to do that, which took like at least 20 hours a week. And I was working for Apple doing like customer support for at least 20 hours a week. So I was basically working like a full-time job or more. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because you really need to spend so much time like building your skills. And it was really, I think doing the master's program was a really good environment for that because like, you know, it's all related to breaking you into that field. So that is a tough one. It's just like you need to grind, I guess, and like every minute, every chance that you get, spend your time in one of these authoring tools or reading these books. Get yourself immersed in the industry, social media, I guess you would say, on LinkedIn and Twitter. Consume as much of industry content as you can in your downtime. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. As I would imagine it would be for any kind of career change when you're trying to break into something new. It's just
right.
like,
Jack Hutchinson is saying volunteer in your spare time. And J Rock is saying find a problem, solve it, and then teach people around you how to. And it really is, like you said, it's a grind. And do you think that the priority of doing that is really to kind of be able to fill out that portfolio?
well, if you don't already have something to point to that's going to give you a lot of credibility in this space,
Mm-hmm.
like I would say, the portfolio is definitely like the key piece to breaking into the field, I would say. I mean, I think it's why I've been able to find success more quickly than if I was just like trying to work my way up the corporate ladder or something. Can't understate the importance of a portfolio, at least if that's what you're going to be pointing to. If you've already, if I feel like it might not be as necessary if you have something else you can point to. Like I know Matthew Bibby, he's like an e-learning consultant and he doesn't have a portfolio, but he has really great tutorials that are really technical that he's been posting for years and he's been in the field for years. So he really gets his name out there that way. And I would imagine if you have 10 years of corporate experience and you're applying to a similar job, maybe you have a credibility or authority that way. But definitely the shortest way is putting a portfolio in front of someone and they can look at it and say like, wow, this is the kind of work I want to see for my company. This is what we want. So by extension, this is the clear person we want for this role or this position. Excellent. Again, maybe not so much for higher ed, but corporate, freelancing, very important.
Oh no, that's great. That's great. And so Shonda, if what Devlin's saying is right on, and I see there's a ton of great feedback happening in chat right now. So this is like we have a wealth of perspectives that are really, really helpful. So you have a section about learning instructional design theories, principles, and methodologies in your articles. What would you consider the most important and relevant principles of the set of the things that you had listed in your article? What do you think would be most important that just stands out, maybe comes back around on a regular basis?
Good question. I would say the most important. So learning objectives, I'd say, are very important because that's what the rest of your design is going to stem from. Like your learning objectives, which you need to make sure are like measurable and strong, or else you're going to be starting from like a shaky foundation. But those are like the signposts. Those are how you know whether or not you're successful. And then by extension, like alignment. So it's not good enough to just create some really, really great learning objectives and make sure, they're so measurable and awesome. That's not good enough. You need to make sure that every single thing you include in your instructional intervention is aligned like an arrow with those objectives. Mm-hmm. So like the content, the quizzes, the activities, everything needs to be supporting those objectives or outcomes, or else you're not doing instructional design right, I would say.
That's great. That's a great answer. How did you learn about the theories and the principles and methodologies? Was it just, I know you completed your master's, right? But was it just experience or,
Definitely the master's program helped with that. Dr. Jim Klein was like really good at teaching that kind of content at Florida State. So I think what I said is probably like from a lecture of his, and but I mean, they did a really good job at those theoretical basics for instructional design. And then, yeah, definitely using it in practice, using it on all of my personal projects, making sure I had some clear learning objectives to start from. And I think I'm kind of like a nerd on that front. Like I really do like working with the objectives and yeah, making sure they're strong. But yeah, I'm sure I mean, that's the part that I feel like would be tougher to self-teach is the theoretical stuff. But I'm sure there are some great books out there. And then there are books like Kathy Moore's Map It, which deals with action mapping. And that's kind of a different approach because your objectives are like the actions that you want people to perform, or that people need to perform. And I think that's, those are the best kind of objectives. It doesn't get more measurable than like a literal physical action that someone needs to perform
Yeah. And like you were saying, this stuff is important, right? I mean, it's important to know this stuff, the theories and the principles and the methodologies.
If you're just like an e-learning developer and you just want to spend your days building other people's storyboards and articulate storyline, maybe it's not as important. I mean, there are other theories that you'll probably want to know, like multimedia theories and how those relate to learning. But yeah, if you want to do design the full instructional intervention from start to finish, I'd say you definitely want to know the theory.
Right. No, and I would love to hear, like, if you guys in chat, I know we've got a mentorship conversation going on, but also like, theories, principles, and methodologies. How important has that been for you? So, I'd just love to hear some of your feedback. And hopefully we're moving at a decent pace. I'm trying to make sure that we get everything in probably around 10, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to start asking you some of the audience questions, but for now, let's just keep going what I have for the article. You list some specific instructional design technologies to learn. Like I think you had Articulate in there and what else? Adobe Illustrator. Why those technologies specifically? Are those tools were those things that at Florida State, they said you need to know this, or were these things, is this based on experience? How did you pick out those technologies?
Yeah, definitely based on experience. Florida State didn't focus a ton on the technologies. It was really open, even on like e-learning projects. It's like, here are a list of 5 authoring tools, pick one and run with it. And I think in most cases, they're like, yeah, build this in Word or something. And I'm like, oh, can I use Illustrator? Oh, can I use Storyline? So I was always trying to use a tool like that I knew was in demand in the market, which is, I guess why I mentioned those, because when I started my master's, I still thought I would have to work full time for a couple of years to like get my business off the ground, because that's what you always see. People are always like, work for a couple of years, build up your network. So I thought that's where I would be. So I looked at, hundreds and hundreds of job listings and looking at what people are posting in them. I did dozens of interviews and just talking to people who needed freelance projects and stuff, who ran their own businesses, who had been successful at it for 10 or 20 years. So, and these are the technologies that would come up, and these are the technologies that I focused on the most. And I've never been like, there have been very few times. I think there are a couple of times where it's like, oh, well, we use Captivate and Storyline's not going to work. And there are more times where it's like, oh yeah, we've been using Captivate, but we're open to using Storyline. So yeah, I started with Captivate. I did a couple of projects with it. And then when I went to Storyline, I was like, wow, like this is so easy. Like with the layers and the triggers. It just felt so much quicker. Obviously, I don't know how much we want to dive into authoring tool critique, but I have found that the vast majority of clients, at least in the clients I've worked with, which has been corporate, nonprofit, even government, Storyline has always been, if not the go-to tool, then they've been open to it and okay with it.
Mm-hmm. How much time do you find yourself working with authoring tools in what you do now?
Oh, so when I got started, I spent like every day in Storyline, like thousands of hours in Storyline. But today my work, it's a bit more varied. I have projects where I just do the development, and I really like those projects, especially the ones that require more technical skills like JavaScript and stuff. So I've definitely developed that e-learning development skill set a lot. And then I do projects where I do the instructional design and the development. So I'll write the scripts, do the objectives, write the storyboard, but then I'm the one developing that storyboard, or my partner. I work with my fiance, Taylor, and she's really good with the development too. So sometimes I'll hand it off to her to do the development. And then I do XAPI work, which some people may be familiar with, but that's more technical, getting data out of things, helping with data strategy. So I don't spend as much time in authoring tools now, but still a lot of our work, the deliverable is a course that's built with Storyline, or little interactive learning pieces that have been built with Storyline. Nice. And I really like working with vector graphics, and I use Illustrator for that. But if you're working on courses with a lot of photorealistic imagery, then Photoshop would probably be better. But they're both pretty similar, at least like functionality and UI wise. But Photoshop is better for photos and Illustrator is better for vectors.
Now, so this is interesting to me, and it sort of like makes me think about a question that I'm often asked. You have this English Lit degree, things that are not related to any type of like web. I mean, like programming or back-end development or anything like that. But it sounds like from a technical perspective, you're really proficient. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, do you know how to code in HTML? Like, being able to jump into XAPI and being able to navigate through that. Like, how much work did you have to do to be able to be competent in that way?
Short answer, a lot. But yeah, I mean, I never thought of myself as like a coder or a designer or any of those things. Like, I was really just a writer coming out of undergrad. But I knew those were like my gaps, I guess. Like there were a couple of times when I was an undergrad where I was like, oh, I'm going to build a website, and I would start going through some kind of online course and do like HTML and CSS stuff. So I knew the basics, but yeah, after I got into the master's program for a little while, I had to first learn the design skill set. I got like the non-designer's design book, like contrast. It talks about contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, which are like the 4 like foundational things. And that I've really just been getting better at as I practice, and I still struggle with it. Like, it's not something that I just sit down and, I'm going to design some mock-ups and it comes really easy to me. I have my fiance help out a lot with that. I'm like, I'll do a mock-up and be like, oh, Taylor, what do you think? And she'll be like, oh, that's not working. And then I'll do another mock-up, and it just kind of goes like that over and over until I get something that looks good. So that's the design side. And then the technical side, I think I really dove into that. I was diving into Free Code Camp, and I think the first challenge was like build your portfolio site after going through their like HTML and CSS content. And I was like, I'm gonna really just like go in on this and really make this like my portfolio, and I'm gonna code a portfolio from scratch. So I did, and I think that probably took like literally like 1,000 hours, like so many nights. Like, I would get done with all my master's work and my classwork, and it'd be like midnight, and I'd just be like trying to solve a JavaScript problem for like 3 hours and maybe figure it out, maybe go to bed like frustrated and try it again the next day. So it was just like a really big learning process. I started with Free Code Camp, but if anyone's dug into code, they probably know like once you actually get into a project, it's just so much Googling and finding stuff on Stack Overflow and figuring it out. But the thing about that journey is that it was like really, I guess, like inspiring and like addicting in a way. Because when I started, if I wanted to write like HTML, like hello world in HTML, I would have to like Google things and Google tags basically. But it's really cool because as you do it more, there's more that you can just write from your head. So I think when I was first like doing some HTML and CSS, like just from memory, I was like, oh man, like I'm in a coffee shop just typing code. Like I feel like a coder now. and then after I got started with the JavaScript, it's like back at square one. And it's like, it was like so confusing in the beginning, but then like, as you go, you just start like writing stuff that you know from memory. So it's really cool. And I think I've picked it up fairly, not super quickly, but fairly quickly, just because it is like learning a language. And like language was really my thing. Like I loved English literature, learning, French. I can't speak French now, but I really liked the classes in undergrad. So I guess I just approached it like that. And that is really what it is. You're just learning a language. So
yeah, no, that's fascinating. I really admire that because it's true. You really kind of have to just get in there and do it. It's not like something that you can just sit around and think about. It's something that you have to just, if you're going to code, start coding. If you're going to design, just start designing stuff. And it's great to hear that your experience with that. So let me see here. I am going to, what do I got here? Okay. All right. So I got just a few more questions that I've seeded that I'm going to ask you, but I'll probably end with those. So
Okay.
let's start. I'm going to go into the Q&A area, and I'm just going to take some of the higher voted ones. Those, I'm going to throw those at you. But before we totally get into that, we do have a couple polls that if folks in the audience, if you go to the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there is a poll button that you can click, and you'll see if you haven't already taken them, just let me know. Like, I'm seeing that I'd asked whether or not you were currently an instructional designer. Gosh, I can't believe it, but let's see. 55% said yes, 44 said no. So we have some real like newbies here in the group. And then Devlin had asked this question: are you most interested in freelancing or full-time positions? And it looks like full-time. Oh no, it's tied. Okay, it's tied. It's half and half right now.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating. Really, really fascinating to me. Okay, so let me get into this top voted question right now. Oh, which is actually one that I seeded. Where do you concentrate all of your networking efforts, and how beneficial has networking been for your career? Yeah, this is a good one, because I'm wondering how the heck you got so many people to jump into a TLDCast.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I feel like my most successful networking efforts have been the ones that don't feel like networking. Like, I don't know. I know that's not, like, there have been times where I try and I do like cold outreach. And that's probably not networking, but cold outreach hasn't really worked for me. I tried it for a few days. So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I've been posting somewhat regularly. I try to post at least once a week. Sometimes I miss a week if I don't have like anything exciting to share. Twitter, I know a lot of instructional designers hang out on there, but I don't think I have a very big following on there. But yeah, I feel like the most successful networking is like when you actually are like building relationships with people. Like Kath Ellis, she's really been helping me. She's someone I've looked up to like since entering the field, because her website is just like so nice. If you haven't seen it, kathellis.com. I use that for inspo for like every portfolio redesign. But yeah, I think I just reached out to her like several months ago, and I was like just asking about like how she got so good with the visual design stuff, because like I said, like that's something that isn't easy for me. And I'm getting better at it. I know the basics, but looking at some things in her portfolio, I'm like, this is just like so professional, and she does it all herself. So she's like, yeah, let's just hop on a call and talk about it. And so we hopped on a call, and I think talked for like 2 hours about that and all sorts of other stuff. And then she's just like, oh, do you want to meet every week or every other week or something? So, and now I talk to her all the time, every week, and we just dive into what we're working on, go through our process on everything. So yeah, it's cool. And just reaching out to people I see on here and just like getting to know them, I guess, has led to new opportunities that you wouldn't expect. And yeah, it's just cool. That's what I like, because I feel like early on, like networking seems like a scary thing where it's like, you have to like force yourself to talk to people and to like these people. But it's been working for me, just talking to the people that you like talking to and just trying to put yourself out there, which is hard sometimes. But I usually like if I guess I don't like, if I want to talk to someone, I guess I just like do it, if that makes sense. Like I've been really persistent, like doing my undergrad thesis. There was like a professor I really wanted to talk to, and I think I was like bordering like stalker level or something. Don't need to get into that, but I guess just be persistent. Like sometimes I would message people. I think when I first messaged Kath Ellis, like asking for advice or something like that back in 2017, she didn't reply, because she probably gets messages like that a lot. And that's happened with other people too, where I message them and they just don't reply, even though I'm not trying to sell them anything. They're just probably too busy. And then I'll wait a couple of months or a couple of years in some cases, and I'll message them again and about something new that came to mind. So I guess I'm just persistent about that. Not being like, I'm not saying like just hound someone until they respond to you, but I think that is part of the reason why I try to like respond to every message I get, because I know it just doesn't feel good. Like when I was breaking into the field, and some people just like don't give you the time of day, even if they say like, oh, I'm really busy, but good luck. But I try to respond to every message for that reason. And yeah,
No, that's great. Yeah, and you're definitely on LinkedIn. Would you say that like just like focusing on like sort of one sort of social media channel has been more beneficial for you so that you don't spread yourself too thin, or like is LinkedIn the best because it's the most focused, or like
Yeah, so LinkedIn in general has just really helped me get my business off the ground, because that's where most of my clients would find me initially before SEO started picking up. So like my first year in business, that's where I got pretty much all of my work. They would find me on LinkedIn just from like keyword optimization, like, you know, putting in contract or freelance instructional designer, e-learning developer, dropping those keywords in a lot of places throughout my site, trying to make the copy engaging, and then just linking to my portfolio really early in that copy. So people would go LinkedIn and then go to my website from there. So that was kind of like where I would, you know, where people would find out about me, and then they would either email me or reach out on LinkedIn about potential projects they have. So LinkedIn has been really important. That is where I've gotten the most. Yeah, that I'd say that's like the primary social media I post on. Well, I mean Reddit too, but I never really thought of that as like, oh, I might get clients from this. But weirdly enough, a client I was talking to last week, or a potential client, I think we're going to move forward. She's like, oh yeah, I first came across one of your posts on Reddit, and then from there went to like your LinkedIn and your website.
yeah.
So I was like, wow, that's the first time I've heard that one. But
Yeah. I have to say Reddit is one of my favorite spots just to kind of look if I need inspiration about like what should we talk about in TLDC coming up. I'll often go to Reddit just because a lot of the other resources that I use can sometimes get you know, like J Rock is saying, food and cats. So Reddit is good, you know, just to stay a little focused, but it's rarely ever mentioned. You know, I never hear anybody else ever talk about it. You're one of the first, and also you're one of the moderators for the instructional design subreddit. So that's very, very cool, and I'm sure you'll see a pickup in subscribers now with this TLD cast. Let me ask you this next question that is voted highly. What are your thoughts on the difference between instructional designers and learning experience designers?
Ooh.
I added this one late, so hopefully it's not a surprise to you.
No, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it, but it is something, you know, it's something everyone thinks about. It's like, what do I call myself? And I still struggle with that. Like when I submit bios for different things, I feel like I have different titles for myself. And I feel like that's a consequence of this field. I mean, you know, two people can be called instructional designers and their day jobs will look completely different. So I really do like the learning experience designer like concept. And, you know, it seems to be an instructional designer who's more focused on user experience and visual design, and built there, you know, it kind of has a connotation of building these more modern web experiences than what you typically see of these, like, you know, SCORM packages. Here's how you click next. Here's how you click resources, that sort of thing. That's my impression of it. And it puts a lot more focus on the people. I don't think that relies on having a certain title, you know. So I made the decision to use instructional designer a lot more because I did go through a phase where that's what I labeled myself as, a learning experience designer. But if you look at the traffic on Google and you look at what people are searching for, it's like learning experience designer and like instructional designer. And if you look at what people know our responsibilities as outside of our field, like the first thing they're going to come across is instructional designer. So I used to have this internal debate a lot about what do I call myself, especially because I do so much on the technical side. But I decided to just stop worrying so much about that and just put work out there. And I use the term instructional designer since that's what people are searching for and that's what people are going to come across first. But I do think that the goals associated with learning experience design are really good and valuable and important.
Yeah. I love that you actually, you know, are basing your decision on search.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of my strategy. Not with this website, but with my last one. I had this really like super fast website. I mean, my main goal is to make it so that the content I produce would be easy to find when someone types it in on Google, kind of like performance support. That was like my concept when I started building a lot of this content. So yeah, I saw that people were searching for how to become an instructional designer, and I saw all the content on Reddit. So I'm like, all right, how to become an instructional designer. And that's the article. Yeah.
That's great, Devlin. That's great. I love hearing that. So here's another question for you. What should be your top priority if you're looking for a job as an instructional designer? And there are a lot of people doing that right now. You know, like I know that our sessions that have anything to do with job seeking or interviewing, anything like that in this field are extremely popular.
Yeah. So I think most people might know the answer to this one. Portfolio, definitely, with a couple of exceptions. Like if you're trying to get into higher ed, I think probably getting a degree would be pretty important, because I've heard that they're pretty selective about education backgrounds. But if you're trying to get a job in the corporate space, or if you're trying to get started as a freelancer doing project work, a portfolio is like very, very high up there. I had interviews for positions, and I landed work that I never would have had the chance to do with how many years in I had and how much experience I had. But it's just because of my portfolio that people saw it and could envision it, basically their logo and their content on there. And yeah, I think I saw someone in the chat say earlier, it's not just having the projects to show off, but it's talking about your process. So with the e-learning heroes challenges, I think I did one of those to start. That's a good way to practice like your visual design skills and your e-learning development skills and trying out new interactions. But the really strong portfolio pieces are going to start with like a need or a problem. And then you're going to walk the reader through your process of how you solve that problem, why an instructional intervention was the right choice to solve that problem. And then, you don't even need to have a full-fledged interactive module that you show off, that you delivered. Like I think when I revamped this portfolio, I just used like screenshots and some video content. So you could even just do mock-ups like in Adobe XD to show off what it might look like and explain how it might function if you're just trying to churn some stuff out early on. I mean, make sure you know how to like deliver on that and actually develop it. But
do you have a public portfolio you share at all?
Yeah, just with this one. So yeah, I definitely have a portfolio, and I spent like a week rewriting my process write-ups when I published this new website, and I tried to dive like really far into detail because that's worked for me on one of my earlier portfolio sites. My portfolio has like really changed over the years, and this one that I have up now is working really well for me. I landed like 3 new clients in the first month that I've had it up. So yeah, it's definitely working better for me than the last one. And I thought it was going to hurt my SEO because like I'm adding more pictures and it's going to like load slower and stuff. Because my last one was like super minimal, bare bones. It was like you're just on like an RSS feed basically. But with this one, I like designed it a lot more. And actually the SEO has just been like taking off. I guess because Webflow, they brag about their like super fast servers, which helps load times. If you're accessing it from India or something, you're getting it on a server in India. Mm-hmm. And my last one was like that too, but still, it's been working really well. And yeah, I dive really far into the process, and then I think I have a little thing at the bottom where you can put in your email, and it sends you a link to the full version of like 5 or 6 projects.
Oh, this is great. And Taylor shared a link to your portfolio, and I'm really, really fascinated about that. I'd love to produce like an episode where we just focus strictly on portfolios. So yeah, I'll be taking a look at yours. Now, Brandon submitted this question early on. He's asking, I feel like my creative juices regularly run dry after a while. How do you keep your ideas and activities fresh and innovative?
So I think every creative person probably struggles with this. Like there are times where, like, especially last year, I finished up some like huge year-long projects and I was just feeling like so burnt out and didn't want to work on anything, didn't want to work on any new portfolio pieces. So yeah, I just like took some downtime during that time period. And I don't know what sparked it again. I think I do know what sparked it again. I was seeing this new write-up on Kath Ellis's portfolio, seeing how nicely designed it was, reaching out to her. And then in my first conversation with her, she told me about Glide apps, which I hadn't heard of before, but now I see all over. So then I was like, oh, this is like a really cool new tool. If you don't know what it is, it lets you build an app, and it makes it really straightforward with a Google Sheet as the back end. and the UI components are like already designed for you. So you kind of just plug and play, and all of your data on Google Sheets just gets drawn into it. So once I learned about that, of course, my mind was like, I wonder what we can do with this in XAPI. So then I made I really dove into that project. Like it felt like it did when I was in my master's again, like diving into these personal portfolio projects. So I just got like really inspired by that one. And I think that's when things like picked off again for me. So I don't know. I mean, I guess one, like don't burn yourself out too much, because I've been there and I just need some downtime after that. And I knew I needed that downtime. And then two, I guess just looking for inspiration, like I guess just know what inspires you. I mean, I don't know how helpful that is, but that I don't have like a super, here's what I do to spice things up again. It kind of it's just like this tool inspired me and I just dove into it. And ever since then, I'm like just diving into all sorts of different stuff. There's like all these projects I want to work on again now. And and that app actually I didn't publish yet. Because after doing that, I like learned about Webflow, and I'm like, oh, I need to like redesign my portfolio website, and I dove into that. And now just yesterday again, I'm like finishing up that app, and I think I'm gonna start piloting it this week. And yeah,
no. So it's sort of like look to other people for some inspiration. Like, you know, it sounds like you went to Kath Ellis's site and you found some stuff, and that's definitely from a design perspective. I see that all the time, that people, you know, they'll go to, you know, whatever websites to look for inspiration for certain things that I do. And even with music, you know, if I will try to listen to completely different styles of music to be able to, you know, inspire me to write. So I'm sure it's along those same lines.
So that's a good point. Definitely looking to other people. And if you're interested in like freelancing or business stuff, there are a couple of really good YouTube channels that I've found that have inspired me at points before. Chris Do, most people might know about him with The Future. He's like really popular. It's just spelled like Chris space Do. And then Rand Segal, who I learned about from Kath Ellis. I think I watched like 100 of his videos. He talks a lot about like web design and Webflow and business and pricing in general. So just a couple of recommendations there.
Nice. I'll put those in the show notes. And here's a question that I found really, really interesting. Any skills that you know of that are probably either obsolete now or going to be obsolete for instructional designers? Maybe something that, you know, could be that may have been on a list, like say 5 years ago of, you know, say the how to become an instructional designer in 2015, but wouldn't be there anymore in 2020. Is there anything that, you know, like for instance, if somebody's working on building up a particular skill that is actually going to be obsolete at some point? Any ideas on that?
As far as skills that have become obsolete, you know, I haven't been in this field super long, so I don't know if I can speak to that super well. I mean, I know authoring tools come and go. As far as skills that will be obsolete, I think that's hard to tell because you know, this field isn't exactly the quickest moving field in a lot of respects. I mean, we're still using a lot of really old technology. We're not, you know, there's fields like marketing and stuff that are like so data driven now, and you know, really focusing on what's the most effective thing we can do. Whereas we're still mostly focusing on churning out like score and package courses built with authoring tools. So I'd say in an ideal world, we would probably move away from the authoring tools we have now, the slide-based authoring tools, and probably focus more on performance support and more just like responsive web-based learning experiences that are like concise and to the point. Do I think the skills to build the score-based stuff are actually going to be obsolete though? I mean, that's hard to say. I guess I'm hopeful in some sort of way, even though that's where my business comes from. But I don't think it's going to be obsolete anytime soon. That's for sure.
That's great. How about, you know, on this one, on the authoring tools, just your quick sort of take on, you know, if somebody had to choose right now between using Captivate and Storyline, what would you say? I
mean, I'm a little biased. I've spent probably 30 hours to 50 hours in Captivate and probably like 5,000 plus hours in Storyline. I do all client work in Storyline. I'm super efficient with it. So that I definitely recommend Storyline, but there might be people here right now who are, you know, not liking, because it seems like it's a somewhat polarizing debate. I mean, I know Captivate is better for some things. Like I was really impressed with their software simulation features. So I think if I was ever working on like serious projects that required a lot of software simulations, I would probably go with Captivate, and I think it'd be worth it picking that tool back up. But yeah, Storyline, there's nothing I've like needed to do that I couldn't do in Storyline. Especially because I can, I use JavaScript to like extend it as needed. So that helps a lot.
Nice. Okay. All right. So we got about 10 minutes left. All kinds of user submitted questions. Maybe we'll just kind of go lightning round on this one. If you can't answer it, just say, pass or something. Just because there's a ton of questions.
Sure.
And let's just see how you do. So, how to learn and master LCMSs such as Moodle, et cetera, and XAPI, and where to find the right classes to learn it.
So Moodle and stuff, I'm not really an expert in that. I haven't done a ton of LMS work. I help clients get my content onto their LMS, but beyond that, I haven't done any custom LMS builds or anything like that. XAPI, I do a lot of work in. I just recently published a huge article on what XAPI is and what a learning record store is, and basically how to get started. And I have some really in-depth tutorials on how to send custom XAPI statements and get them back into the Storyline course from Articulate Storyline. So that's on my website. Should be pretty easy to find. Yeah. Nice.
Okay. Thanks. And J-Rock is totally going to disrupt me again. He does this every time. How can a new instructional designer gain LMS experience? That's a pretty good one.
Yeah. So when I first started and I didn't have much LMS experience, I think Adobe Captivate Prime, I think that's their LMS, Adobe Captivate Prime LMS. Their LMS was like super user friendly. It has all the functionality, and they had a free trial at least a few years ago when I was doing this. So I'd say free trials if you don't have a job where you can play around in the LMS. Because I also had that, the job I had at the time, I was exposed to Moodle. But yeah, it seems like most of them have free trials. I would say practice uploading your course to it, see the kind of data you get back from it, create some user accounts, give them different permissions. But yeah, free trials.
Nice, free trials. All right. When it comes to portfolios, is it more beneficial to showcase the entire course created, or are bite-size examples more valuable?
So I think you would probably want at least one like cornerstone write-up where you show this is how I used an instructional intervention to solve an instructional problem, which is a gap in skill or knowledge. And to really write through your process. And whether you want to link to the final product or not, I think that's up to you and not as important. But definitely, you could show little demos from that, or show screenshots or a little video of how an interaction works if you didn't want to show off or didn't build the entire thing. But then I also think it's good to have those other examples like, tab scenario, tab interactions and stuff like that. But I think that would be a supporting thing to show off your visual design skills and e-learning development skills. But you want that main piece.
Nice. Okay. Let's see. Monica is asking, rapid prototyping versus storyboarding. Any best practices? What have you found to be more beneficial for your clients, or is it a combo?
So I've done both. I started out doing more rapid prototyping when I was newer to the field, and I guess more naive as to truly how many changes could possibly come down the line. So I do both now. My preferred process is like a text-based storyboard that I'll do in like Google Slides. So it's all text. I explain how interactions will work, that sort of thing. Not Google Slides, Google Docs. And then from there, I'll build a rapid prototype in Storyline, and that's not the whole course. It's like a very small fraction of the course. Maybe that show an interaction and only the first couple of pieces of it work. But that's where I show off the visuals, the look and feel, the general functionality, and I get that approved. And then I build the final course. And I think that's really important because you don't want to be in the situation where you have the final course built and someone tears it all down, and you spend 2 weeks building this and then you put it in front of the client, and yeah, it's not gonna be a good time for you when they don't like the look and feel, or when they revamp all of the content or something. You're basically just building a whole entire course from scratch again.
Right. Kim saying, preach it, Devlin, text-based storyboards. All right, next one. How important do you see mentorship in the process of becoming an instructional designer? And if it's important, what is your approach?
Yeah, I'd say it is really important. I had a mentor. I think I would call him a mentor. And when I was first getting into the field, where I could really talk about this tech stuff and visual design stuff, but they kind of drifted away. So I feel like there was a little bit of time where I was serving as a mentor for a lot of newer people, but I didn't really have that mentor who was like helping expose me to new stuff and push me. So that's been really, I think that's a big part of why I've had this next like boost of like creative juices flowing, is because Kath Ellis is kind of mentoring me in some ways now. So yeah, I'd say it's really important. Try to find someone. It's important in anything to have a good mentor to guide you along. So yeah.
Definitely. And earlier in chat, there was lots of conversation about mentorship, and even some folks offering, themselves as mentors. So scroll up to
Awesome.
the earlier conversations. I'm sure you'll be able to find someone in there. Let's see here. Kim is asking, your article mentions getting a master's degree. On Wednesday, the guest here on TLDC said she's pursuing a graduate certificate in instructional design instead, which she feels is more work focused as opposed to academic focused. Could you talk about those two options? So getting a master's degree versus getting a graduate certificate in ID. So, and we've had this conversation on TLDC before. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, so there's obviously so many programs out there, and they have their different strengths and weaknesses. I know some people who did certificates and they have great jobs making like 150 grand out of the certificate program in really high cost of living areas. But yeah, I'd say if you find a good certificate program, I think that would be sufficient to break into the field. Again, it might not be sufficient for like higher ed, but it sounds like a really good way to just take those core instructional design classes and get the theory and background you need to really use as a jumping off point.
Yeah, totally agree. Gosh, these questions are just coming in. We've just got a few minutes left. Okay, here's one from Andrea. What type of questions do you ask SMEs and clients to ensure you get enough content from them, and also determine what type of performance support is needed? We probably need another hour to talk.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I'd say Christy Tucker has some really good content on her blog about working with SMEs for branching scenarios, which is helpful for me. Sometimes you just get content and you kind of work through it on your own and formulate some questions for the SME based off of that. And I also have liked using action mapping to work with SMEs on projects that work well for that, where you focus on the specific actions that someone needs to do to be successful, with whatever it is you're trying to help them be successful with. And that's a really good way to keep SMEs focused and stay away from information dump courses. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Abhishek is asking, how can you transition from being a teacher or trainer to instructional designer? That's an interesting one. I'd love to hear feedback from the chat on this one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not sure if I'll be the best person to ask about that because I haven't transitioned from those roles, but I'd say leverage your experience however you can, because obviously there's more overlap with instructional design when you're a teacher or trainer than if you're just like in a completely unrelated field. So I would, I'm sure you can draw on some examples from your experience in those roles.
All right. I'm just checking. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I cannot see you though.
Yeah, my video's just disappeared, and I think my camera might have overheated. But
Okay.
Let me keep going here. Well, last question. Oh wait, let's see. Okay, we have a question from Laya, but I'm going to take that one off just because that one's a big question. Okay, here we go from Lawana. I just completed my master's degree in instructional design. How does someone get into this field with no instructional design experience? She's in this boat, and actually, I think. Yeah, this is kind of a popular one. We sort of went over it a little bit before, but give us the quick answer.
I'd say this is what the article is really good for. I mean, yeah, it's obviously a huge question. The short answer is build a really compelling portfolio. And to do that, you need to learn the theory. You need to have some kind of conceptual understanding of what kind of problems you can solve as an instructional designer. And you need to show that off and build people's confidence in your ability to do that using your website or portfolio. And, you're going to need some interview skills as well. But just look at job postings, see what they're asking for, and then just Google that stuff ad nauseum and practice with it too. get your hands dirty with the tools, build stuff, put it out there, get feedback.
Love it. All right. Well, that's it. We hit the top of the hour. Devlin, thank you so much. Sorry, my camera dropped off, but oh well. I think it was just getting too hot in here. So with the with the rifling of questions, but I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing all your knowledge with everybody. The chat has been absolutely fantastic. I want everyone to know, like, this is what TLDC is about. We just love having these conversations. We do this a couple times or more a week. And, we also profile different people, just all of it. Like we are just trying to build connections in a world that is like kind of a little isolated and divisive now. So come back to TLDC, check things out. Always happy to have you, and everybody enjoy your weekend. And thanks again, Devlin. Go ahead. If you have any contact information or anything like that you want to post, go ahead and drop it in the chat. And this recording will probably be up in like 10 minutes or so.
Cool. Yeah, I see a lot of questions we didn't get to. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm sure Luis will drop some links in the show notes. And thank you, everyone, for coming. This is an awesome first experience on Crowdcast. I hope to do some more of these.
All right. See you guys later. Thanks, everyone.